Probably the greatest challenge of making something inside of Photoshop or making layouts in Photoshop is probably dealing with all the pieces. A lot of times you're dealing with lots of different text, lots of different colors, lots of different artwork, and so on. And in doing so, these programs, Illustrator and Photoshop, all use multiple layers. In fact, there was a time when Photoshop didn't have layers. There was an actual time that Photoshop didn't have layers. Boy, that was a tough time. Photoshop 2.5 or 3.0 came out with layers, but I remember I was teaching students back in 2.5. I was teaching them before layers how to do things, and you had just one layer and you had to do everything. So how we did multiple things is we would use vector shapes, just like we do. You could actually make a vector shape inside of Photoshop, and then I would make a vector shape. I was teaching students. This was one of my first lesson ever in Photoshop. I have to tell you this because it's an exciting topic. But again, it was before the Photoshop had layers. What I did is I showed them how to make a vector shape. I was teaching them how to make pliers. So I made one side of the plier in a vector shape, and then I colored it. Then we duplicated it, and we put it, well, actually I didn't draw it quite right here. It's got to curve over a little bit more like this. Then we duplicated it, so it went around like this. So we duplicated the vector shape. We made the other side, and then we colored that with a gradient, a metal-looking gradient. And then we added a circle here. Of course, I didn't have a circle vector shape, so we used the marching ants, this one, the circle, and then filled it like that. And we made pliers. My first Photoshop lesson. But nowadays, Photoshop has layers. And if you look here, you'll see this is a big mess. Look at all these layers. One way I keep things organized with all those layers is by making folders. So if you haven't used folders, or they used to call them bins, I don't know, what do they call them now? Layer? Or what do they call them? Sub-layers, maybe? They used to be called bins. Groups now. They call them groups. The older version of Photoshop called them bins. They call them groups. So let's talk, and today I'm going to talk about organizing things in layers. And the reason why you want to do that is so that you can duplicate things in layers. You can export things out from a layer, actually, and things like that. So we're going to talk a lot about organizing all the different pieces that you might have. Of course, we can do a screen capture. Do you remember that day we did a screen capture where I talked about how to steal things? So we can steal things from web pages also, if you want. So let's make a new layout. I'm going to make a new zircon layout right now. Okay. So let's say you have some pieces. If you look here, you'll notice there's one that says auto select up here. So if you already have existing Photoshop like this one does, if you want to move things around or select things, you'll notice you have layers over here. You can select things in the layers. Like I can click on an object and select it, click on an object in the layer and select it. That's an easy way of selecting things. Or if you come over here, and right now if I click on this tool right here, it's not selecting it right here. See that? Not selecting, not selecting. But over here inside of Photoshop, if you're using Photoshop, you can have something called auto select up here. If you click on the auto select and then click on an object, it'll automatically select it. That might be, sometimes it's good to turn it on, sometimes it's good to turn it off. So if you're moving things around or doing things, notice how when I clicked on it, it selected everything within this layer, or in this folder. I'm sorry, we call them, are they folders, right? Groups, I'm sorry, groups. Selects everything inside this group because this product, this text, these arrows are all inside here. Since I have auto select, it thinks I want to select the entire group. See that? Okay. Let's say I want to select the logo. If I click up here and I click on the logo, it says, it selects everything. Why? Because the logo that is here is inside this group. So how do I select the logo out of this group? Yeah?
How do you select the group? You just click on the group folder?
No, I'm talking about how I turn the auto select on right here. See where it says auto? You have the move tool, which is the normal tool. So in Photoshop, always use the move tool. This is the #1 tool to move things and select things. It's called the move tool. It's up here in the upper right corner. Whenever you're using the move tool, you can use it to select things by using the auto select right here. You notice how it says group, and you can say layers. See that? So I was talking about selecting a group. Yes?
Does it auto select mean that it's automatically selected?
Whatever you click on. Like, remember I was clicked on here? See how it selected this group of stuff right here? So it selected everything that was in the products because I clicked on the product or something that's inside there.
It also automatically selected if you just clicked on another group in the layers panel?
Yes, you can. I can click on here and it'll select everything too. So these are probably the easiest ways to select things. Either here in the layer window. See how I can click here, click there, click here. Like the search box.
But will it not automatically select the thing in a layer panel if it's not on auto select? Like it's not on if that's not checked and you click on those folders, it won't select them?
No, if you're clicking in the layer window, it'll select everything in there, even if this is not checked. If I turn this off, I can still click here and it'll select everything. Is that what you're saying?
Oh,
Yeah. Everything, it'll still select everything in that group.
But what exactly does checking that do?
What does what do?
Checking the auto select do?
Right now, if I don't have auto select selected and I come over here, look, I can't click on this text. It has this selected. That's the last thing I clicked on. It stays there. But if you click on the auto select, I can click on something different and it'll select that. So what does the auto select do? It allows me to click inside of the interface in the layout itself to select things without having to select them over here. That's what it does. Okay, again, I was talking about selecting the group, right? See group right here? So if you want to select the individual part, let's say this product right here. See the product right here? If I click, it's saying group, but you can go to layer. See where it says layer right here? And I can click on the layer itself and it'll select the object itself. So again, by changing this from group to layer, it can do that. Another way of doing it also is I believe you can hold down a command key. No. Didn't work. I swear there was a command key that you could hold down to do that. No. Okay. How about layer? There we go. If you want to select multiple things, of course, you can hold down the shift key, but that doesn't seem to work very well because it thinks I want to rotate this. If things go crazy inside of Photoshop, like you get stuck in this mode, like right now it thinks I want to rotate this object right here, and you rotate it accidentally, the key is to hold the escape key. Goes back to normal. So if you're ever using Photoshop and something is doing something, you're like, I don't want it to do this, I don't want it to do this, or you accidentally go like this, and it's upside down. Now I have to try and rotate it back to straight. You don't have to rotate it back to straight. Hit the escape key on the keyboard. It'll go back to before you messed it up. Without doing undo, you don't have to do undo. There's not undo. Escape. So if you're using the move tool and you're moving things around in your layout, hey, I want to line this up, you can hit escape and go back to normal if you're doing this. Now, if you moved it, escape will do that. If you moved it, you have to go back to the undo. Again, undo is under Command Z, right? Or under Edit, undo. So those are important features to get you going there as far as selecting things and doing that. So let's start a new layout for our famous company here. Our famous company needs a new layout. To do that, again, inside of Photoshop, you can start with a new file. So I'm just going to start with a new file by going under File, New. Again, you have custom ideas here if you're going to make one for a web page, a mobile app, film and video, iconography. Those are the most defaults here. If you've got a web, what does it give you? It gives you common layouts. Now, the problem with these common layouts is they're not so common in general. I know that 1024 by 768 used to be a common layout, but again, most people today have very uncommon screen sizes. You got your Surface Pro, you got your, the new Apple iPad. Anybody see the new Apple iPad, Super Pad or whatever they're calling it, Super Pro? Or no, it's iPad Pro, right? I think that's the thing. What is the dimensions of the iPad Pro? What is it? It's a Retina display, and how do I deal with Retina graphics? It's just painful. The most important thing is that you're trying to keep and give somebody an idea of what it would look like. Your proposal is to give you an idea. It's not to do the exact, it's going to change and evolve anyways. So you can use the common size. This one says web most common size, 1366 by 768. That's probably the widescreen, right? Widescreen. I don't know, that says most common there. And then you got some web. And of course the 1920 by 1080 is what? What is that dimension?
HD. High definition.
Your television, yes, yeah, high definition TV. So that big TV you have sitting in your house right now is probably 1920 by 1080, unless you spend the extra money to get yourself a 4K, which is probably 2048 by, oh no, 4K would be 4096 by something. Oh, and then they have the MacBook Pro 13 Retina display, which is 2560 by 1600. And then the MacBook Pro Retina 15 is 880 by 1800. Yes?
I was curious, if you, like today, if you were designing a website primarily for the desktop, what resolution would you try to hit?
Well, it depends on, how old are you going back in time. You know what I mean? If I'm going to make a web page that's not responsive, that's going to be kind of stagnant, static. Usually I would go with the standard 1024 by 768. I wouldn't worry about the height too much, but width-wise. This can go back to older screens, right? Think of people that still use older computers. That is my, or you can always go and take a screen grab of somebody else. Like how big is West Valley's? It's a static page. Command-Shift-4, right? And then put my cursor in a corner and, Command-Shift-4. Click and drag. This one is 1,000 pixels across. Almost 1024.
Okay.
So this is 1,000 pixels. That's pretty good. The 1024 would be that. There's 1020.
I've seen, like when I was working in the program that I've been using, they had the 1024 and they had that 1440, I think.
That's kind of a laptop dimension for like a Mac laptop, I think, an older one maybe. I think my Dell was like that, something like that. But yeah, that was a common. 1024 by 768 was a standard 17-inch monitor for many, many, many years. Like when we used to use the old, before, not these ones here, but older ones even, would be the 1024 by 768 was a standard 17-inch monitor. Remember, they measure the 17-inch diagonally, right? So that's a good starting base, if that's what you're asking, I think. Yeah. I mean, this would fit on pretty much everybody's screen. Maybe not an iPad because it's not responsive.
So then if you went, if you took that same website that's 1024 and you put it onto a Retina screen, it would appear smaller, right? Because unless you did.
No, I think the browser would expand it because you're using code and you're not using the standard graphic. It's not like taking a graphic and putting it on the web. It's not like taking a screenshot and putting it on there. If you took a screenshot and did that, it would look smaller. But since this is using the browser, it's going to reinterpret the pixels, right? So it's going to look like this on my laptop, which has a Retina display, because it's code that's using the browser. But if it was in theory, if it was a standard just plain graphic, it would look smaller.
Okay, so even if you in your HTML code, if you specify a width of 1024 pixels, it's still going to appear the same.
Yeah.
Okay.
This shouldn't look tinier on my laptop, which uses a Retina display, because it's coded. But a graphic may, plain graphic.
Well, they would expand it, right? If I
Yeah, and it depends if it's in a browser or if you're displaying it, in a program. I don't know. It depends on what's putting it onto the visual, what's making it display on there, right? So what makes this display is the browser. Browser displaying this on the screen. So I don't think it'll shrink it down. And I'd have to look on my laptop. But it looks like this on my laptop. I don't know. Anybody look at the West Valley? Does it look like that on their Retina display? I think so. Okay, let's try and make something that's... So again, I just started with the 1024 by 768, right? I think that's what I did. Again, the command plus and command minus is zoom in and zoom out. Command plus, command minus. Command plus, command minus. Command plus, command minus. If you're zoomed in, you hit the space bar, it gives you a hand. Same as inside of Photoshop. Those are ones you're going to want to learn to use constantly. They save you a lot of time and effort. You don't want to have to come over here and use the magnifying glass. Takes too much time to click there. Command plus, command minus. Next, the first thing I usually bring up is the rulers or the measurement. Inside of Photoshop, inside the settings, preferences, you have all these different preferences inside here. Probably one of the more important ones to use is units and rulers. In units and rulers, you can tell it how the rulers will be. If I'm measuring things in pixels for my interface, I might choose pixels as my ruler measurement. My ruler measurement. This is under, again, preferences. And point size, again, I can leave points if I want. You could measure your type in pixels if you want, or millimeters. I'm going to leave points there for now, because I'm used to points, and so on. And so I'm going to leave. And then they do have a grid if you wanted to make a grid on there with gutters. Okay, what does that mean? Well, and we really haven't talked about responsive design and things like that, but when you build a responsive website, usually you start with a kind of a grid, okay? And that grid can have certain columns with gutters in between. And the purpose of that is so that when it goes from one screen to the other screen, you can tell it how many columns in the next screen and how many columns in the next screen, so that as the boxes or the objects that are being scaled for the responsive design, they can follow a common dimension. Because you don't want it just to kind of scale arbitrarily. So that's sort of where this kind of comes in here for the column size and things like that. That's sort of what this is kind of using. And if you look at Dreamweaver, when we were making responsive designs in Dreamweaver, it actually shows you the actual grid in there with the gutter in between. I'm going to kind of avoid that for right now. Maybe I can think of a better way of doing that if you want. Then we have guides and grids and slices. And so in this case, I'm just going to leave this default. And then we have plugins, type, I don't know, 3D, experimental features, I don't know what they are, performance, scratch disk, and so on. These are pretty much the same. So the only one I changed is the rulers. To bring up the rulers and see the rulers, you can go underneath the window, or view, view, rulers, and it'll bring the rulers up. Now when you measure anything inside here, it's going to start with the 0, 0 in the upper left corner. So if you look up here, you'll see it says 0, 0. And the reason why we kind of follow this structure is everything, even if you're programming something to move across the screen, or you're programming something to be in a specific location, everything's normally measured by the upper left side. So you can think of that as being the 0, 0 position. So let's just say I want to make, and right now we're not even, we're using 1024, okay? But we wanted to have kind of a margins on our website so that my website doesn't go all the way to the very edge, So let's say we wanted to have maybe 50 pixels on each side, right? 50 pixels on each side. So what I can do before I even start putting content onto the page, I can use something called guidelines. And what a guideline is, or a guideline is a way of putting your cursor in the ruler itself. I put my cursor in the ruler. I hold my left mouse down, and as I drag my left mouse out, you'll notice this little line comes out. This little line is called a guideline. As I'm dragging it, you'll notice the numbers come up, and you can actually put your number right over top of, hopefully, and it won't go exactly. I was close. It went 449. I'm sure there's a way to put it exactly on the 50-yard line here. If I go to my info window, it gives me info. No, that's not going to do it. I'll have to think about it. Yes? The guideline is located by putting your cursor in the ruler itself. Remember, you got to bring up the rulers first under View, Rulers. Putting your cursor in the ruler itself, holding the mouse down and dragging out, will drag out a guideline. You want to move a guideline, you can put your cursor over top of it and drag it. It's like an object that you can move around. Again, I want 50 pixels on the other side over here. Of course, if this is 1024 across, if I put my cursor inside there and going to go over here, what's 50 minus 1024? Well, we could use 1025 as an average, right? So 25 less would be 1,000. What's 25 less than 1,000? 957, 956? 976, I'm sorry. There we go. Whoosh. There we go. 976. Oh no, that would be 974. For right now, it's close enough. I understand what I want to do. For my layout, I'm going to start with some graphics that I want at the top of the screen. Usually, if I'm going to make web graphics inside of Photoshop, I tend to use the vector tools because the vector tools are a lot more flexible. Okay, the vector tools are located inside of Photoshop over here in this box right here. These are the common vector tools. You got your rectangle tool, you got your round rectangle tool, you got your ellipse tool, you got your polygon tool, you got your line tool, you got your custom shape tool. These are ones I would use. So if I was going to have some graphics go across the top of my page, I would use a vector tool. I'm going to have a nice sort of bar that goes across the top of the page. I'm going to use the vector rectangle tool. It should snap. If it's not snapping to the edge of your guideline, you might need to turn snap on. What does snap mean? Is as you're drawing things, they will snap to other things. Snap is like a term used to describe. So when I draw my box, I want it to directly start right on top of the guideline. If snap is not turned on, it's under View, Snap right here. View, Snap, Snap to. And it looks like they're all on. Snap to the guidelines, snap to layer, snap to document bounds, and so on. Snap, I think it's turned on, hopefully. Let's see. It's turned on. It should, yeah, see how it kind of, when you get to the edge, it should snap right there. See how it snaps? Snap, snap, snap. So I'm going to have a little bar at the top of my website. Oh, I should measure down how big I wanted my bar. I'm sorry. Let me undo that real quick. Again, I hopefully planned my website out, and you can actually probably bring in your wireframe in here and just draw the color objects over top of it. Now I didn't do that. I probably should have, but I didn't. But let's just say my bar that goes across the top of my page, okay, I'm going to use the zircon blue bar that I have, and I'm going to talk about sucking up colors and things like that in a moment. But I want it to be the 1,000 pixels. What am I to know? 50 on 50 other side, something like that. So what's 100 minus 1024? I'm trying to think of how wide this is going to be. Doesn't matter. I want it to be 90 pixels high. Is what I'm trying to say. So my bar is going to be, like 960 pixels across by 1,000, or do I say 90 pixels high. So as I'm using, and I'm going to bring up a window called the info window. The info window, right here's the info window. The info window could be a very useful window when you're making things inside of Photoshop. Because if I'm using the rectangle tool, notice how as I move the rectangle tool around, it'll give me some measurements. Those X and Y measurements that you see the info window coming up is the location of where the cursor is going to start from the upper left corner, which is 0, 0, right? You see as I move the cursor around, look at the info window. If you don't see info, it's under window info. As I move the cursor around inside of Photoshop, as I move the cursor around, you'll see the numbers changing. Those numbers refer to the numbers of where the cursor is located within the screen. Again, 0, 0 is in the upper left corner. So if I start up there, I'm going to put my cursor up there. It should snap to the grid because I turned snap on. I'm going to draw my box. As I draw my box, notice the pixels start showing up next to it. Notice how the pixels are showing up next to it. Okay, and so I said I wanted it 90 pixels high. You'll notice the pixels show up. I can make my box exactly, hopefully, 90 pixels high. No, 91. It's not snapping. That's where you would probably have a grid come up. After you make your shape, you'll notice you can actually alter your shape itself. You got a width and a height right here. If I wanted exactly 90 pixels, I can type in 90 in the properties window, and it's exactly 90 pixels high. If you don't want the stroke to go around in the properties window for your vector shape, you can turn off the stroke. Again, there's a properties option for your vector shape. That's why I use vector shapes. In addition, you can have round edges for your, so if you wanted this, instead of it being a square rectangle, you wanted round rectangles, you have those options down here. So Photoshop has really improved on the vector shapes that you can use to build interfaces inside of Photoshop. And they even have options down here. Of course, this is not the color I want to use. It's an ugly red color. Ugly, ugly, ugly red. I want to use zircon blue. And you say, well, I didn't write that down. Okay, so again, how can I get zircon blue? Oh, there it is. There's zircon blue there. Okay, there's the one I usually use. I can either steal it from another one, or can I steal it from a web page, right? Maybe I could go to the web page, or West Valley Blue. I can go and steal from there if you remember that. I can go to zircon.com. Here's a blue too. This looks like a little darker blue than the one I was using before. I can use my Command Shift 3. Oh, Command Shift 3. Hopefully it sounds probably not turned up, but it takes a screen capture, right? Remember the Command Shift 3 takes a picture of the screen. I can open that up inside of Photoshop. Open it up in Photoshop if I can find. Here's my screen capture. Not that one. Not that one. Yeah, that's the one. And open it up in Photoshop. Again, if you want to steal the colors, I think I was showing you that before. I can use the eyedropper color inside of Photoshop. The eyedropper can be used to select a color. Once you use the eyedropper to select the color, there's a couple different things you can do. You could either make a palette, and what a palette would be is if you want to use, make your own palette of colors, or swatches in this case. There's a couple different ways to make them, but this is probably the easiest way is to do it by hand. Again, you can click on the color swatch here and write down the number. This is 164E99. You write that down. Or you can go underneath Window, Swatches. Swatches. And here in the Swatches window, you can make your own kind of color palette. It looks like somebody's already been making some color palettes here. It looks like these are some colors here. To make your own colors in the swatches inside of Photoshop, there's a little pop-up window in the upper right corner. In the upper right corner, there's different ways. You can save swatches, you can load swatches, you can replace swatches, you can reset swatches. I might reset back to normal. Oh, I guess this is normal. And then I could say new swatch, a new swatch. And notice how it puts the blue that I have sucked up with the blue. It's sucked up with the eyedropper. Do you see that? And this is we'll call it zircon blue. How about that? Zircon blue. Boom. Shows up right here. It's one of your colors. I like the yellow of this product. I can click on that. Yellow of the product. In my swatches window, go to the upper corner and save. Where is it? What did I say? Oh, new swatch. Zircon yellow. Notice how it also shows up here too. See it up here? They're up here. I guess Jean was making these ones, right? Was Jean making these when she was doing her, what was it? Was she making a dragon or something like that? Yeah, that was my dragon sound. But the real advantage of making a swatch is you can save it right here, up in the upper corner, right there. You go to Save Swatch. So after you make a series of colors, you know, you can use your eyedropper, suck up, make a series of colors. You can save them, and you can call it Zircon Colors. And then notice I can put it wherever you want. I'm going to put it in the desktop. Then you can email it to somebody or something like that, and then they can use it in Photoshop. How do they use it in Photoshop? Ah, right here. Load swatches. And then, you know, so you are working with a team of people. You can share colors back and forth. Very useful to do. Making swatches, saving swatches, loading swatches. So again, I can go back to my graphic here, and I say, hey, there's my blue. I want this to be my zircon blue. I can come over and using my, where is it? My properties window. Again, here's the color right here. Here's the color right here for this box. And I can choose my blue. You have a question? No, you're cool? Okay, so there's my blue. Beautiful blue. Love it. Next, I'm going to put my logo inside there. Put my logo in there. So I'm going to go back to my logo here. I want to steal this logo from this layout, the one I had previously. Notice how it says layer, and I was able to select this layer automatically. Did you see that? So how do I copy this from this to this one? Well, there's a couple different ways. Might be easier to drag it from one. You can drag from one document to another document in Photoshop, or you can copy and paste. Copy and paste. If you were going to copy and paste, you can't just copy when you have it selected like that. What you need to do is select it as it is. To do that, you hit Command A on the Mac keyboard. That should select everything within that layer. So since I had the logo selected that logo itself by hitting Command A. If I hit Command C on the keyboard, it should copy it. And if I go over to my other layout that I'm working on, I hit Command V. And it should have came over, but maybe, oh yep, there it is. It's in the center. Now that's one way of going about it, but that wasn't the best way. What was the problem with that? Well, it didn't bring it over as a smart object. And look at that. If I make it big like that, ooh, yuck, as Steve Jobs. Remember our Steve Jobs? Yuck. Steve Jobs would say yuck. 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 Look at that. Yuck. Not the best way. Here's a better way. When this object was originally made inside of, let me deselect here. When this was originally made, this logo is a vector. Okay, this is a vector from Illustrator. So we want to keep the vector information so that when I put it into the new layout, I can scale it and it'll look nice and sharp and won't be all fuzzy and yucky. Do you remember that? I mean, you just saw? So an easier way might be to drag it from one to the other. That's the easiest way that I found to bring a vector in. I don't know if they have a better way. So notice how I put my new window in a new tab. So you got to kind of tab things, and this is a tab. And I know Photoshop works kind of goofy like that, but if I put it in a new tab, so see how I have now my layout, this layout in one tab, and how I got it into a new tab is just by putting my cursor up there and dragging down. Dragging down. See, if I want this to be all alone, drag down, boom, it's all alone, drag down. So now I have my objects tabbed. if I take it now from this one, it even says vector smart object. Do you see that when I have it selected? I grab it from here and I just drag it over to the other one. And it should bring it over as a smart object now. Do you see that? Smart object. Now I can scale it. I can scale it and it'll keep its vector information. And when you're done scaling, you just hit the move tool right here or hit the checkbox right here. And boom, look at that. Ah, beautiful. No more yuck. I dragged it from this. Don't use the copy and paste method. I dragged. You can drag from the layer into here or drag from the document in there. So I have two documents open. See them next to each other? I don't know an easier way to bring the smart object in. I tried doing the copy and paste. It just doesn't work. I don't know. Maybe it will work now. Let me try copy, paste. No. Oh, it did. It didn't paste it as a smart object. See? Look. When you copy and paste, it doesn't paste it as a smart object.
Just by dragging it into the other file, that makes it a smart object?
When you drag from one document to the other, it copies it in there. So if I have one object over here, so once you have two documents open like this, like I want the product. Here's the product right here. I want to bring that over to the other one, right? I can simply drag it over here to this document. Boom, it's over there. I want this blue bar over here. This blue bar is beautiful. I can hold it and drag it over. Boom, it's over. No, not if it was originally a smart object, it'll drag it over as a smart object.
So how do you make it a smart object?
The smart object came from bringing the Illustrator file into Photoshop. So it's when you bring an Illustrator file into Photoshop it becomes a smart object.
Just as they're called the Illustrator file?
Right now, that because it's a logo that was done in Illustrator, it's a smart object. Okay, my other class is coming in. They're antsy. I could talk to you all day about doing this. We'll continue next class. How about that? You need to learn Photoshop in the method I'm telling you, though, so that you can make layouts nice and precise, especially using the vector shapes. It's important, I think. Okay, let me save what I did. I'll start where we left off.